we're now going to turn our attention more towards some of these other components that we haven't really discussed at length as of yet. Now these really come into play, especially when it comes to monitoring for SIP. Now take a look at this side here, this component called Network Usage KPI. Now what this actually is this is how we measure our system, or how UCD measures a UC environment and how it attempts to connect media sources to each other. Now what that really means here is this. We'll take voice as an example, since that's what we use and it's probably the easiest to demonstrate here. Now what we mean when we actually say the network usage KPI is how SIP is really flowing through the network and how it's attempting to be set up. Take for example this very first metric here, what this is actually measuring. Now in terms of what this is doing for us, this is really a key performance indicator for when SIP flows across the network from point A to point B. It determines if it's degraded, we'll say either yes or no, based on if it connects and if media is flowing from point to point. In fact, we really even know this just by taking our mouse and hovering over the caption for this. It'll actually give us a huge little description that you can pause this and read that if you want, and it just disappeared anyway. But you can read this on your own time if you want to. It really says the same thing, is that ultimately what this is telling us is that these are really key performance indicators for saying I see SIP sessions attempting to be set up, and really what this is measuring is how successful are those setups, based off of a moving time average. In this case, our default is going to be we have one for 5 minutes, one for the entire day if we're doing a day-by-day KPI measurement, and then one for the calendar. Now we're going to use, we could take a global look using these buttons for a KPI, which is, this is a query where we can look for really sessions over a time period. We could also view them as a graph if we wanted to. So we could make a graph view and pin it if we actually had a intention to do that. In this case though, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this one, this voice connect attempts. That's basically every time a call was attempted to set up, what's the percentage of degradation, meaning how many times did a call fail to set up? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to run an ad hoc query based off of this, but instead of going to investigate sessions, there's a handy little feature here for this, and that's this little, well, I call it a notebook icon. It's probably something else, but it's this little icon here, this view history of KPI results. Now at first, when you look at it, it might not make a whole lot of sense. But really in terms of a moving 5-minute window, that moving day window, and then that 30-day window, we can take a look here. I'm just going to go ahead and sort this by ascended. And we can see that really right now we don't have a whole lot of attempts that were really calls were attempted to be set up and failed to set up. For the past day, we can see that the percentage is still pretty small, albeit we did see some. I have it sorted based off of the percentage of degradation, meaning how many times it failed. We see that we do have a little mark at the bottom. For our example though, I'm just going to go ahead and go into the moving 30-day average. I'll just drag it more into the center view here. And I'm going to do the same thing, which is sort by degraded, and we'll make it descending so we have the bigger numbers at the top. And I'm just going to select this top one here. Now we can see this timestamp is starting from, well, January 11th. So what I'm going to do though is that with this selected, I do have different options for querying this. In this case though, what I'm going to do is, instead of querying based off of the session endpoint, which is kind of the default, I'm going to query based off of the termination reason, because that'll give us more insight into how these calls were really failing to connect. Once I click that, I do have the query information as usual and in a very nice way auto-populated for me, so that all I really have to do is hit submit. And then we do get our results back. Now we don't go to the graph view in this one, and that's fine because we can always go there later. We can't pin this graph, but we can still see this is our breakdown of SIP 400 level errors or error codes. These are ones that are actually specific to Nectar codes, so ones that it might see based off of behavior in the network. These are SIP 500 codes, which are kind of scary. And we have some 300 level ones. So when we go into results though, we do see what that percentage of breakdown is, as well as all of the results that actually showed up, which counted as a degradation code. So I'm just going to sort this to make it easier to see here. Now, looking at it this way, we see, okay, we have a 302 temporarily moved, bad request, unsupported media type, 503, that's a kind of a scary one. If I were looking at this and, well, we'll pretend the number was bigger than just 1%, I still see 503, and to me, I kind of want to know what's going on there. Now, the cool thing is you can continue to drill down in a lot of ways with UCD, especially when it comes to a SIP monitoring environment like this. So what I'm going to do is with this 503 selected, and I'm just going to drag this window over again. With it selected though, I now have this button appearing at the top saying Session Endpoint, which means I can actually query the calls that really fell into this category. Now if they weren't too old, they will appear here in our search. But once I hit that button, everything gets auto-populated here. And this is more so just if we wanted to look at this and say customize it after doing the first search. But for now, since we already have the query filled out to exactly what we're looking for, I'm going to say submit. And then as we can see, these are actually the calls, or the sessions if you will, where a call was attempted to be set up here based off of these numbers and it failed. So from this point, I could actually either copy this information down. I could actually even just copy it by shift clicking and saying select. The other cool thing that we could do that we haven't really gone over much, and this kind of falls back to SIP captures and PCAPs, is with all of these selected, instead of downloading individual PCAPs, this might make it a bit confusing, but if I wanted to, I could have all of these selected and hit download PCAP here, and it would actually combine these into a single PCAP. Now again, that can make it a bit confusing to look at, and sometimes it's a bit much, at least for my taste. So in here, what we would do is we would just say select one of these and just download PCAP. But we're not going to do that here. We're actually going to hold off now, since we've kind of illustrated our point, which it was being, of course, that if you wanted to look at things over time, especially this moving window, looking at key performance indicators over a summary of time, then this is really the ideal way to do it if you're actively doing it based off of a non-reporting schedule.